Hello and welcome to yet another episode of me reacting to fan-made cards I found on the internet. Today's episode starts off with a pack made by ZetaLambdaNinja. I hope I somewhat pronounced that right. And he made 3 different cards that are all themed around the Turmoil expansion. And they bring a really cool concept to Terraforming Mars because they give you bonuses based on 2 different parties. Normally there are turmoil cards in the game that you can only play when a certain party is ruling or if you have 2 delegates there. For example, GMO contract, I think it's called. You can only play that if the greens are in power or if you have 2 delegates in the greens, and then it gives you a pretty strong bonus. And you get like 2 cards for every party in the turmoil expansion. But there are no cards that benefit from 2 different parties. And he made 3 different cards because there are 6 parties that benefit from 2 different parties each. So the first one here, Joint Subcommittee on Infrastructure. You can play this whenever you want. So it doesn't have really a requirement. The requirement is flexible because if Unity is ruling, you get a bonus, and if Mars First is ruling, you get another bonus. And let's say Unity is ruling and you have 2 delegates in Mars First, then you could get both bonuses, which is pretty cool. If only one of these parties is ruling, then you get only the 1 bonus. So this is an event card, costs 9. As I said, it requires... I think it doesn't really require anything, even if there is this box up here. It's an event, and it says if Unity is ruling or if you have 2 delegates there, you gain 1 titanium production. And if Mars First is ruling or you have 2 delegates there, you gain 1 steel production and 2 steel. Now that we've cleared up how this works, I think this card is really strong because if both of these conditions are fulfilled, you basically get the effect of titanium mine and mine, but for 9 minus 4, so for 5. So it's just 1 more expensive than a regular mine, but you also get the effect of titanium mine, which is insanely good. However, it's pretty difficult in the early game to fulfill both of these requirements. This is like a card that's insanely good if you can get it for full effect in the first gen, but it's basically impossible because in the first gen the greens are always ruling. And to get this full effect in the first gen, you would need to get 2 delegates into Unity and 2 delegates into Mars First. What could really happen in this case, though, is let's say you would like to go for Unity anyways, but like the other 2 players are pushing Mars First heavily because they are like playing a lot of building techs, for example. So in Gen 2, Mars First is in power. You have placed 1 delegate in Unity in the first gen, and you just placed another one in the second gen because you're already going for Unity. That's your strategy. Then in the second gen, you fulfill both requirements and can play this, and it's still an incredible development card. It's insanely strong if you play this in the first like 3, 4, or even 5 gens, depending on how long the game goes. But of course, even for such a strong development card, if you play this in the late game, it's not really great. But yeah, it's really strong. I think you could make it like 1 or 2 MC more expensive. But again, you need to fulfill both requirements for it to be really good. Like if you only fulfill the titanium requirement, then it's titanium mine, but 2 more expensive. You can't pay for it with steel, and it doesn't give you a tech. And if you only fulfill Mars First, then it's basically 1 more expensive than mine, because 9 minus 4 is 5. But again, you can't pay for it with steel, and it doesn't give you a tech. Of course, Media Group or IC can make this card better. But yeah, if you get both effects, it's really strong. And you also have to acknowledge it's pretty funny with the drum picture here, and probably hard to read out this flavor text, but you just need to go down in the description, click on the link, and check out this original Reddit post where you can find this picture in better quality, then you can read the flavor text and imagine Trump's voice saying that. Makes perfect sense and it's pretty funny. So yeah, let's get to the next card, which again is one made by ZetaLambdaNinja. And it's Joint Subcommittee on Research. This one requires or is based on the Reds and the scientists, and it's also really good. Again, it costs 9 as an event. If the Reds are ruling, so the bonus based on the Reds, then each player with the lowest TR, so that just means if 2 players tie on the lowest TR, let's say 2 players have 20 and the third player has 23, then both players at 20 TR gain this bonus. They both gain 3 MC, and you, who has played this card, gains 1 TR. Of course, you would like to play this card when you have the lowest TR. But in that case, you would also want to push the Reds. The Reds are really good if you are the player with the lowest TR, because then you just get a TR for free if they get in power. And the effect for the scientists is that you just draw 3 cards. Drawing 3 cards is insanely good for a card that costs 9. Just think about research. That card costs 11 and draws you 2 cards. Of course, that's only half the reason why you play it. It also grants a point and 2 science tags. And the 2 science tags are like the most important thing about that card. But again, drawing 3 cards is really, really strong. And the cool thing is, a science strat, which is what you want to do if you vote for the scientists over and over again, works really well, at least in the early to mid game, with a low terraforming strat. Because to get up card draw, development, and a lot of science tags, you basically spend all your money on that, and you're not terraforming much. And also your opponents, if they see you get a good science combo going, they want to rush the game and try to give you as little time as possible to for your science strat to pay off. So they will probably have more TR than you. So you also get the full effect of this in like most cases if you're going for a science strat. So it's pretty synergistic. And if you get the full effect, I think it's really, really strong. The drawing 3 cards thing is probably more impactful than just the TR, but if you get the 3 MC and the TR, then it's pretty good. Again, I think you could make this 1 or 2 MC cheaper, more expensive, definitely not cheaper. But it's also quite hard to get this like early on. But it's not as critical to get this early on. This could also be played in the last gen and be really good. Like Joint Subcommittee on Infrastructure, this is not that great if you play it in the late game, because it just gives you development, no points, no cards, whatever. You want to play this as early as possible. But Joint Subcommittee on Research, you can play this in the last gen, basically for full effect. It doesn't give you any development. Cards, points, and money, instant money, is still really, really useful in the last gen. So it's really strong and more flexible than the first one. And for everyone who paid attention, the last 2 parties that are left over are the Calvinists and the Greens. And they also thematically work perfectly together because they are the terraforming parties. And that's why this card is also called Joint Subcommittee on Terraforming. Again, it costs 9 as an event. And it has 2 effects. The one based on the Greens is that you're getting 1 plant prod and 1 plant. And the one based on the Calvinists is that you're getting 2 heat prod. This one is really good as well. The cool thing about this is that you can really easily get this for full effect in the first gen. Because the Greens are already in power every time you play the game. The Greens are in power in the first gen. And then you just need to place 1 delegate in the Calvinists and then buy another delegate into the Calvinists. You get 1 for free and then you buy 1. And you get the heat prod out of this card as well. And if you have another card that grants you heat prod, then this is an insanely good strategy, because let's say you also have more whole area. Then you put a delegate into, you put the 2 delegates into the Calvinists, play Mobile Area and this, and you have 6 heat prod and the plant prod, and when the Calvinists get in power because you've put delegates in there, then you also get MC back because you have heat prod. So this is really synergistic again, works really, really well and is really strong. But similar to the first one, the Joint Subcommittee on Infrastructure, this is basically only really good in the first gen, or not the first gen, the first few gens. But probably also a bit later in the game. Plant prod and heat prod can pay off even in the mid game. But in the super late game, this doesn't do anything anymore. Not like this one, which you can also play in the last gen. So I really like these cards. I think they are pretty strong, but I don't have anything against putting in a few more cards that are based around the thermal expansion, because I think playing around the parties isn't that strong there. There are just a few cards that are really, really good, especially the Calvinists and the Reds, I think, get shafted pretty hard. The cards that are based on them in the turmoil set are pretty bad. I'll put a few on screen right now that, in my opinion, are really bad. And this joint subcommittee set here is pretty cool, and I'd love to play with these cards. I think they are all themed very well, pretty synergistic, and pretty strong. But yeah, let's get to the next set of cards. And for the next set of cards, we have a few different fan-made corporations, and they all have been made by Brynney. We've already reviewed a few of his fan-made cards in the past. Again, I've linked his Reddit post in the description. Definitely check it out. And he's a regular on the Terraforming Mars subreddit. He's done a few cards in corps. So check out his profile and look at a few of his fan-made cards. They are really creative. I love them. Give those posts a bit of love. And yeah, the first one here is a corporation called Infinity Stocks. And it starts off with 55 MC, so that's pretty high. It's comparable to like Credit Corp in that regard. Also starts off 3 MC prod, but minus 5 TR. So you start off the game with 5 less points than everyone. And because TR also gives you prod, you also start the game off with 2 less prod than everyone. But it has a pretty strong effect that says when you raise your MC production any number of steps, raise your MC production 1 additional step. So except from this card, which is a bit weird, because normally it would say including this card. Like if you look at Whitehall, for example, it says that you get 3 MC back whenever you play a card with non-negative VP, including this, because Whitehall also has a non-negative VP on a corp. And that's basically how it works with every card. Cards trigger itself. But thematically it makes sense. We have to read the flavor text for that later. So how that works is if you play like sponsors, you get 2 MC prod from the card, and you get an additional 1 singular MC prod from the effect of this corp. And it doesn't matter how much MC prod you get, like it doesn't matter if you play sponsors or immigration shuttles, you will always just get 1 MC prod when you play a card that grants you MC prod. And then also for every 5 MC prod you have at the end of the game, you get 1 point. So even though this corp starts with negative 5 points, at least you're almost at 1 additional point from this MC prod that you get at the start of the game. And this corp is amazing for a long game, I imagine, because in a long game you want to get a lot of prod, and you want to score points that don't increase the terraforming rating. Or the terraforming rating itself it doesn't matter. Like playing TG, for example, increases your terraforming rating, but it doesn't increase the speed of the game. And you just don't want to terraform if you're going for a long game. If you get a lot of MC prod and card draw, then you want to have a game that is as long as possible. And this corp works perfectly for that because you can stack up on a lot of MC prod and even get points out of that. That's normally the only problem with this strat, is if someone ends the game fast and you'll be there with like 30 MC prod, but you haven't played enough cards yet to win. Then with this corp, you've made at least 6 points out of your 30 MC prod. So that's something. And I think this effect is also really strong and helps with accumulating points from this down here. Of course, I think it's also pretty inflexible. If you don't start with a few cards that grant you MC prod, then this corp just has a pretty slow start and an effect that doesn't really help you in any way. Why does it have a slow start? Well, you have less production than anyone else, and there are still a few corps that have as high starting capital as you. There's Credit Core, there's Lakefront Resort, there's Director. They have similar amounts of money at the start of the game, but they are more flexible. They can also go for a fast game if they want to. So, fun corp, fun design. And why does this make sense? In the flavor text, it says that it has been found guilty of tax fraud. And that's why they have this negative terraforming rating. And this 3 MC prod is basically their big income because they are such a powerful corporation. But it wouldn't make sense if it triggers on its own income. So that's why this whole concept makes a lot of sense. But yeah, let's get to the next corporation. It's called SpaceX Alloys. And it's a concept that has floated around for a while. And the concept is that you can pay for building tax with titanium and for space tax with steel. And with this corp, you can do that exactly 1 time per gen. The action says play a card with a space or building tag. You may use both steel and titanium to pay for it. This corp also starts with a building and a space tag. Thematically, that makes absolute sense. And this also helps when going for builder, for example. It also starts with 32 MC and 15 steel. So it's similar to IC, who starts with 30 steel and 30 MC and 20 steel. So this corp has a bit lower starting capital, only 62 worth of MC instead of 70, but it's still a lot. And because of this ability, it's also much more flexible than IC starting capital. Let's say you start with IO mining on your starting hand. There's no way for IC to play that if you don't get like a prelude that increases your starting capital. With SpaceX Alloys, you could easily do it. And expensive titanium cards are especially good because you can only do it once per gen, so you wouldn't want to do it on something like Trans-Neptune Probe, where you can only use up 3 steel, but on something big, where you can make sure that you can use all of your steel on that card. And also the other way around. But normally, especially in the late game, you will run out of really good building tags to play because there are good development building tags, but not a lot of good point building tags. The space tags, it's basically balanced. There are a few good development space tags, and then there are also a lot of really, really good point cards for the end of the game, and even space events for the mid game or late game. Like space tags, especially when you're playing with all expansions, are pretty, really strong. So it's harder to run out of playable space tags than it is to run out of playable building tags, in my opinion. So I really like this concept. I think it makes this corp really flexible. It doesn't per se help you economically. Like if you get a lot of card draw, then this corp probably isn't even that great because you will draw into playable cards that you can use to use up your steel and titanium anyways. Just if you don't get a lot of card draw and have to rely on the cards that you get in the draft, then this corp can really help you to make the most out of your minerals. And of course, with this corp, it's also really good to get mineral production. Mineral production is normally really risky, especially if miner is not in the game. As I said, if you don't have a lot of card draw, you run the risk that you can't use up your minerals, especially if you, for example, play something like Advanced Alloys. even a higher risk to run out of playable cards then. And if you invest a lot of money at the start of the game into mineral production and then can't use it up at the end of the game, then you've just wasted a lot of money. And with this corp, you can prevent that. So if you get a lot of card draw, or if you see card draw in your opening hand, this corp is probably not that great. But if you don't see card draw, but a lot of mineral prod, for example, then this corp is really, really good. But yeah, I really like the concept. There's just one more card left for this episode, and it's Terawatt Trading. Also a really cool idea, but I think it would be extremely frustrating to play. This corp starts with a power tech. Power techs are pretty useless in my opinion. There is not a lot of combo potential for them. I guess at least it's okay for Diversifier, but power techs are also not that uncommon, so even for that, not that great. Starts with 43 MC, a power prod, and every other player also gets a power prod. You would say, well, that's pretty bad. I don't want to give my opponents power prod, but it has an effect that says when an opponent increases or decreases any number of energy production steps, that opponent must pay 3 MC to you to be able to perform that action, including from this card. So at the start of the game, you will basically get 3 MC from every player, because every player needs to increase their power prod from your corp, and then this effect triggers and they have to give you MC. So if you're playing in a 5-player game, you will get 3 MC from 4 other players. So this corp will start with 55 MC instead of 43. In a 2-player game, of course, you will only get 3 MC, so you only start with 46. But that's still okay. This corp basically hard counters Thorgate. If you are playing a 2P and your opponent is playing Thorgate, it's basically GG already. And that's probably the problem with this corp. Thorgate is also already really bad, so the likelihood you're playing against that corp is pretty low because no one's picking it. But if they're picking it, then it's basically GG from the start of the game, because all you want to do with Thorgate is increase your power because it's really cheap, and then use that as heat or to play power hungry cards. And against this corp, just can't do that, because it then basically not only does it just get rid of your bonus, but they also get MC back. So yeah, it's frustrating to play against this corp, I'd say. But the concept is really cool. Maybe, like, this makes thematic sense, but maybe it would be more balanced if this wouldn't mean that the opponent has to pay 3 MC to you, but you just get 3 MC from the bank. That wouldn't make as much sense thematically, but it would probably reduce the frustration factor and make this a bit more balanced. And in high player counts, I think this corp is really, really strong. Yeah, it's a really cool concept, but I don't know if it works out. It's hard to rate. I would need to play with it. But in a typical game, you increase or decrease your power prod a few times. So like, even if you just play something like building industries and power plant beforehand, just be able to play building industries, you need to pay 6 extra to do these 2 actions. And the player who plays Terawatt Trading gets these 6 MC. So that's insane. And if you can't pay the 6 MC, then you can't even play the card. That's just crazy to me. Or if imagine Terawatt Trading plays energy tapping or power supply consortium on someone. They need to decrease their power prod and then also give you 3 MC. That's frustrating as hell. But yeah, interesting concept. I'm not sure I would want to play with that, but really cool idea. But yeah, that was basically it for this episode. A bit of a shorter one, but really interesting cards. I love the ideas on these. And yeah, definitely let me know in the comments what you thought of these cards. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a like and consider subscribing. And I'll see you in the next one. Have a good one.